Hi and welcome to this video on coaching style conversations through crisis and recovery. My name is Kerry Moody and I'm coming to you from the Leadership and Lifelong Learning team in the Southeast. We wanted to put this together for our line managers and wider actually, people out there who are having conversations through crisis and recovery, which is pretty much all of us right now. So we wanted to have a little bit of a toolkit that you could use, and also some other resources and backgrounds into how you might have better conversations in a coaching style. We've been doing a series of work around coaching in crisis and recovery. So if you check out the channel, you can see other bits of work that we've done as well to support this and take a look at it. Again, I'm working today with Rebekah Giffney, who is an occupational psychologist and an associate of ours. She's going to take you through some of the work behind this, and then we'll chat through the tools together. So please feel free to get in contact. You'll see our contact details in the link below, and let us know what you think to the offerings we've put out so far. Thanks, Rebekah, over to you.
Lovely, thanks Kerry. Okay, so for the next about 20-25 minutes, I'm going to take us through this set of slides, which have a number of useful resources and exercises you might want to utilise with your team or your colleagues that you're currently working with at the moment. So one of the reasons really to start us off with is how a coaching style conversation can support at this time. And really it works across 3 levels. So it can really help people to process and understand and work through events that they've experienced that may have been distressing or uncomfortable at this time. As part of that, it helps people to make sense of what's happened. And that often is around processing and making sense of the emotions that they've experienced and how they feel in the context of the situation that they are working through at the time. And then finally, it also supports a way of appropriately debriefing people to come to terms with their experiences and who they are now in the context of the role and the world within which they're working. And ultimately, the goal of any coaching style conversation that you might be having with a member of your team is around helping them to effectively process and move forward positively after a difficult, distressing or uncomfortable event. The science behind this looks at 3 ways in which people can move forward positively after a distressing or uncomfortable experience. So it relates to 3 key aspects that people tend to focus on when they've experienced such a situation. I realise there's quite a lot on this slide, so I'm just going to talk you through the 3 components, and you can obviously read this in more detail following the video. The first thing that people tend to anchor to or recognise after they've experienced a difficult event is around the relationships that they have. So the value and importance of friends and family, the people that they connect with, that understand them, and the importance of those relationships in their life. The second thing that can often happen is they change how they see themselves. So they are often able to reflect on the coping mechanisms they use, their ability to be resilient and resourceful, the strength that they have to keep going through really challenging and difficult moments of their life. And also recognising the vulnerability, the limitations, the areas where actually they could see that about how they were and how they moved forward. So that's another area in which they can focus on in terms of their own psychological resilience. The third thing is around their overall philosophy, and sometimes having a very significant event can change a person's outlook around what's important, what they value, what really matters to them, either in terms of their life, their career, what they want for the future, and what they want for themselves. So having the right conversation that supports people to recognise and process and understand how their outlook and view of the world may have been altered based on these events. Utilising those 3 aspects might be useful for you to think about as you start to have these conversations with individuals that you're working with at this present time. One of the common things that often individuals say is around finding time. Time is clearly our scarcest resource, and often it's the one thing people want the most from you. Your time, your attention, your ability to have that connection with someone else. And that's really difficult at the moment when there's heightened pressure and there's lots of demands and lots of requirements, and you're having to spread yourself quite thinly across all of the people that you're supporting at the moment. So thinking about the quality of the conversation rather than the quantity of the time can be a really useful way of thinking about how you can make sure you're connecting with people. So giving that attention to a 15-minute really focused conversation with someone can often be as meaningful as having an hour in the diary when actually you're not fully present in the moment because you're still thinking about the emails you need to answer and the meetings that you still need to have. So looking for opportunities to have those moments of connection where you're able to provide that attention in a concentrated way that provides quality over quantity can be equally as valuable at this time. The other thing to help you in terms of maximising the time is for yourself to think about what are some of those key questions that feel natural to you to ask, but move you below the surface level of discussion. Because typically, if we're faced with someone and we say, how are you today? How are things going? That in itself elicits quite an automatic response. Yeah, I'm fine. Everything's all right. Yeah, no, we're really busy today. I've got to do X, Y, and Z. So we're keeping very much at a surface, that polite conversation. And actually, the value for you with your team is how can you move through your question to just to dig in slightly underneath that surface. So some of the suggestions that are listed here is around, is there anything that would be useful to share with me at the moment? Is there anything you want to get off your chest and talk to me about? Or is there anything I can do to help at the moment? Is there anything you need from me? Might be other questions that help you to move beyond that surface into that next level of discussion with an individual. Linked really closely to this is the mindset within which you go into that conversation. And as I've mentioned before, life's really busy and hectic at the moment. So thinking about how can you be in the right mindset to provide that focused attention so that you are able to provide that quality interaction with that other person. In the blue box on the screen is just some really simple steps you could take that take a few minutes just to get you used to that and getting you prepared for a conversation you might be about to have. But the mindset's about making sure that when you're having that conversation, you are completely focused on the needs of the other person. So that internal monologue in your own head, the thoughts that might be racing through your mind around the meetings you've got, the emails you've got, the reports you need to send out. It's about quieting that voice so that you're able to give your full attention to the other person. And being able to be open and have that discussion with them in that compassionate way. I thought it would be useful just to share with you the levels of which we listen at, just because I think we listen all the time and we're very good at paying attention to lots of different things. We've got multiple things going on. We've got emails popping up. We've got people walking into the office. We're cognizant of other conversations going on around us. But when we typically listen, we tend to listen at different levels. And what's described on this slide is around what those levels look like. So when we're listening at level 1, we are aware of what's going on and we're interacting with another person, but our own thoughts, as I've mentioned, that internal monologue, that tends to take precedence. So we're almost consumed in some of our own thoughts. And that's listening at level 1. And so we're slightly distracted, so our full attention is not there. Listening at level 2 is where we've started to focus in on what someone's saying. So we're listening to the facts and the words that they're saying. We might be looking for where there might be difference between what they're saying and how we understand a situation, or how we understand something in the context of the world in which we're looking at that particular event. And so we're not lost in our thoughts, but again, our attention's probably around 50 to 60% there. Level 3 is that ability to listen with empathy. And this is where we're taking in all that's being communicated to us in that moment. So we communicate, around 70% of our communications is non-verbal. So when we're listening with empathy, we're listening to fully understand, not just to respond, we're just not just waiting for our turn to speak. So we're listening to really fully understand. And so we're able to take in not only what someone's saying, but how they're saying it, the emotion, all of the non-verbal body language, what's coming through on their face, what's the subtext of what they're saying in terms of what they're really meaning, and what might be going on behind the words in which they're coming out. So we're really able to use all of our skills and all of our emotional intelligence to really tap into what it's like for that person at the moment. And so I know you as managers and leaders currently, you've all experienced a situation where someone might have walked into your office or approached you, and you can see instantly through how they're looking that you need to pause, stop everything, and give them your undivided attention. That's that level 3 that I'm talking about. And for those of you that are listening that are clinicians, that when you're having that patient interaction and you're trying to work out what else is going on with the patient, that's the level that you automatically jump into. So these are skills that you already have, that you already use. And all I'm sharing with you is it's about the discipline of making sure that you're using those in all of those opportunities for those quality conversations that you might be having at the moment. Okay, so let's move on to some of the details around how to have a coaching style conversation and what makes a coaching style conversation different to a normal conversation that you might be having at the moment with people. So a coaching style conversation really is characterized by 3 ingredients. The first is the use of questions. There's a lot more use of powerful questions that will elicit a deeper level of thought and insight from the other person. Reflection is used a lot. So questions and ways that encourage the other person to reflect about events or situations and bring in their own insights and experience to bear on what they're sharing with you. And then finally, it's resisting that urge to tell or give advice in the first instance. And interestingly, there's something that can be quite satisfying about solving a problem for someone and giving the answer. If someone comes to you with a challenge or an issue and you're able to fix it for them, that's quite rewarding for us as an individual. But for the other person also, there's an expedience to getting the answer that they needed. And in the short term, that meets a need. However, in the long term, it means that people developing the construct and the abilities to be able to solve those challenges and work through a process themselves, they're not getting that same level of practice. And we're much more likely to own the actions and ideas more if we develop them for ourselves. So for you as a manager, being able to coach out the answers and the ideas from that individual means that actually for them, they're more likely to bring that to life and to make it real going forward. So in terms of the longer term value, you're supporting them to provide that skill and that ability. And it also, as the last point on this slide says, it provides a supportive and encouraging opportunity for learning and to identify actions, but it's also a really good way of building confidence and self-belief for people as well. If they're able to work through your guided questions and they come up with the ideas, actions and next steps, it gives them that sense of confidence and self-belief that they have the answers, and all you've done is you've helped them just unlock that and move it forward. One of the models which can help with this, to keep it in our mind as we're having a conversation and to work through, is this model that I'm going to share with you now. It's entitled Them, Others, You, and with the 3 circles, we work from the smallest circle on the inside and we work out. So we start with, if someone comes forward with a challenge or a problem that they've experienced, you start with helping to ask questions about, to ask them questions that help bring their own thoughts and insights to the fore. So in that scenario, you might say, so what do you think are the options for action here? What are your ideas already around dealing with this? So you focus very much on the questions that help to elicit their existing thoughts and ideas around it. The second ring then takes that line of questioning and discussion to the next level, which gets them to think about others. And that others might be people, it might be different resources, it might be other things that they might look to seek to explore in order to help solve the questions or the challenges that they're dealing with at that time. So for example, you might then start to focus on, so in the past, for other people that have encountered this, what's been the process that they've tended to approach? Have you spoken to anyone else about this? Are there any examples of best practice out there that we can draw upon? So again, you're supporting them to think broader. So we've started with themselves, what's their insights and take. We've moved out to what to others, and in that sense, broader sense that might other resources or other people. And then finally, once you've gone through that process of conversation, you would then touch on you and your thoughts and ideas. And you would position this as ideas or suggestions. So it might be, you might say to them, so in my experience, I found this, would it be helpful to share that with you and to talk you through that? Or I think actually we've covered a lot. I wonder if some of my thoughts around X, Y, Z might be useful to discuss. So at that final ring, the you, is when you might ask to bring in some of your insights and your knowledge, which you could then to bring to bear on that conversation. Kerry, is there anything that I'm going to pause as I know we're part way through? Is there anything that you would like to comment or ask as I pause at that point?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this model in particular and looking at where you were talking about number 3, you. So that approach seems to be much more of a mentoring style tool where you put your own experience in rather than just a pure coaching tool. So I can see how, as a line manager with all that specific experience, that might be quite useful.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it can be interesting because lots of managers say that sometimes members of their team come to them just wanting the answer, and sometimes they might try and use this approach and their team will go, can you stop coaching me, just tell me the answer, I just want to know. And so it's about, sometimes with this tool I might say, look, I'm gonna, by the end of our conversation we will have worked through, you will have an action, but before we jump to that, let's just work through what your thoughts are and where you're up to with your thinking. So sometimes it's about supporting people to know they're going to get the answer, and you're going to be able to, by the end of this conversation, they're going to know what they're going to do next. But it's about just flipping the conversation and starting with them first, rather than you leading with the answer initially. So yes, you're completely right. It supports that mentoring approach to developing those skills, that knowledge, and that confidence for how they're working with you. So I suppose individuals come to you with the problem, but they might also come to you with their ideas and thoughts around the solution as well.
Okay. So is it worth checking out what that might look like?
Yeah, we can do that. Have you got something you've thought of that we can practice on?
Yes, it's something obviously truly fictional that I can bring at this moment in time. Yeah, absolutely. So, and bearing, I guess the context of this, obviously it can be used elsewhere, but the context that we're putting it in today is in crisis. So just thinking about things that are likely to come up right now. So I was thinking actually, people are being asked to do all kinds of stuff in a very fast and pacey way that's probably outside of their comfort zone. So that's the kind of thing I was thinking of.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. So exactly. So let's imagine you've been asked to do something by someone, and you've come to me going, "Oh, I've been asked to put together this report for one of our execs." Okay, and you come to me as the line manager, and so I would start off by then saying, "Okay, Kerry, so what do you know about what's been asked of you?" And so you'd probably share that with me. And then I'd say, "So why do you think at the moment that's going to be important? What need do you think that's going to be delivered by that piece of work?" And so we'd work through there. And so how do you think you would want to approach that? What do you think needs to be included in the report? And so I'd almost draw out from you everything you already know, and so we can say what's known and where might be some of those gaps. And so we then might move on. Okay, so previously for other pieces of work that have gone to the board, what else have we got examples? What other examples are there that you could get hold of to have a look at? Is there anyone else that you need to speak to clarify the purpose of this piece of work? And so that I'd move then to that next ring of what other resources, knowledge is out there that can help inform what you do. And then finally, I might say, I know from my experience of anything that goes to board, it's probably quite useful that we keep it quite succinct. So would it be helpful for me to share with you one of the papers that went to the last board meeting, so that you've got an example of that as well? And would it be helpful if possibly once you've drafted it, we could look at it together? Would that be helpful? And so going through that process, I've resisted the urge to give you all of the advice and the knowledge, and hopefully you've come up with what would be your action plan for preparing that piece of work to go to an important meeting.
Okay, now that sounds good. And I guess you've got some of those powerful questions that you can anticipate that might come up in every section of this. We don't know the actual answers to them, but the kind of questions that you might be asking.
Definitely. So in the resource slide pack, I think there's about 4 or 5 slides that go through each of the different circles and give suggestions around how you might layer insight and the sorts of questions you could ask in each of those. So there's much more detail covered in the resource pack that accompanies this video. Yes, that's right.
Great, thanks.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to take us on to another model, which is broadly similar to this, but it's probably quite useful when you're wanting to process a particular event that's happened. So in that previous model, that might be a challenge or an issue or a situation where people come to you wanting an answer. And this framework is around how you can, through guided questions, help someone process an event that might have happened. So this focuses very much around those points around processing and sense making. And it goes through 5 steps, and behind each of those 5 steps, again, are some very detailed questions that support conversations at each of those 5. And Kerry, so just looking through each of those 5 steps, is there anything that again, fictional, any situations which might be useful to kind of bring this to life?
Yeah, and I guess seeing that first question about how do you feel, which might not be an automatic first question that you might ask somebody, I was thinking about how this might work well with dealing with somebody who you'd maybe just had some conflict with. I don't know, if I've asked somebody to do something for me or to provide me with a bit of information, and actually I've had some blocks put off. I can see, whilst they're not having a standing up row with me, they're obviously putting blocks in the way, and they're kind of cutting me off. So and that leaves me cross or all of those things. So that might be an interesting one to think about.
Okay, well let's head out. So let's imagine then that Kerry, you've come to me as your team leader to talk to me about how, and let's for purposes of scenario, let's say how Sarah has behaved when you've asked her a question about something, or you've wanted to share some information, let's say. So my role as that team leader is to support you to work through that situation and to help you determine what your next step or action is going to be in terms of working with Sarah, and either providing feedback or recognizing what's gone on. My role in this is not to fix it, is not to then go off and tell Sarah off for her behaviour, it's to support you. So I would probably start off by discussing with you, say, okay, so how, Kerry, I can clearly see at the moment you seem quite annoyed in terms of how you're, so tell me, how did you feel after that interaction with Sarah? And then you talk through the emotions of how you were feeling, and why you were feeling like that. So exploring, okay, so what's at the root of some of that emotion of why you're feeling like that. I then might move you on to start, okay, so when you had that interaction with Sarah, what did you notice about both you and Sarah before, during, and after the interaction? So you at that point might share with me, well, actually, I know that Sarah was going between 2 meetings. She seemed quite harassed in how she was. I know she was dashing, and she'd just come off a phone call, and so and then you might reflect, actually, maybe it wasn't the right time to ask her my question, because actually I'm probably adding more to her workload. So through our conversation, I would be asking questions that elicit those insights and those reflections from you through the questions that I'm asking. And as that conversation continued, I'd move you towards thinking about, okay, so on reflection, what have you realized around the situation of that interaction, and what happened and why it happened, and what led to her being abrupt or dismissing you or not answering your question. And then I'd finish the conversation by then asking you, okay, so based on the conversation we've had now, what do you think is the next small steps you might need to take? What do you feel comfortable doing to either address this with Sarah, or to recognise, to acknowledge what's happened and how you're feeling? And then we'd have a conversation about that. And it's about, I think the important piece is about you owning what you did next and what you're comfortable, but you having time with me to process that situation, to make sense of it and to understand it, and to see that there may be, I think when something happens, we look how we feel, what we think is, and then how we feel, we look through it through a lens, and then that becomes the only reality there is. And it's about, there may have been other things going on for Sarah that if you understand that context, might have made you realise what led to that behaviour and that difficult interaction that took place.
I think that's really interesting, and going back to that, the way you're listening as well, because I can imagine that asking someone how you're feeling, as you said before, it might be I'm okay, or just that I'm cross, but actually there's an awful lot going on under the surface. So it's that what is really going on here, and listening is going to be really important.
Definitely. And I think that's completely right, because our emotions are like an onion, and there's lots of layers, and it's about how you peel those onions, because the first emotion you might experience is invariably not the emotion that's going to be at the bottom that people might be feeling as a result of that. Okay?
Yeah, that's helpful, thanks.
No problem. So I'm going to move us on slightly, just to share with you two quick tools that really can help if you're wanting to have a conversation with someone around their levels of resilience at the moment, and also and their recovery. So are they actively recovering? And by that I mean, are they making time for themselves? Are they psychologically detaching from work when they go home? And how are they helping to look after themselves when they're not at work? So the first tool is called the energy quadrant, and I'm going to talk you through what the quadrant is, and then I'm going to show you on the next slide how you can use it. So the energy quadrant works on a 2x2. So we have energy either being high or low along the side, and along the bottom we've got feeling either being positive or negative. And I've color coded the boxes on the square with what they associate under the energy zones next to it. So in the blue, the writing in the blue box relates to where you've got high energy and a positive feeling. So this is really when we're at our peak performance, we're performing. So we're feeling motivated, excited, we're feeling confident, happy, they're positive emotions. Next to that, in the green box, this is where you've got high energy, but you've got negative feelings. So this is typically when we're overextended or we're feeling quite pressured. So we're working at a high energy pace, we've got adrenaline rushing through our veins, but we're kind of starting to flag. So we're feeling overextended, we're feeling pressured. So we might be more emotionally volatile in this frame. Our patience might have gone completely out of the window. We might be feeling quite impatient and angry and a bit annoyed by things. These description words on here are obviously not exhaustive, so the sorts of things you might capture in each of those boxes, but they give you a general flavour. Then you've got the yellow box, which is when you are low energy and negative feeling. And really, this is when you're in that burnout zone. So you've moved from feeling overextended, which is almost a warning signal of, okay, I'm feeling stretched and over there. And then actually, unless you are taking active recovery and supporting yourself at that point, unfortunately, there is a risk that you'll move into that burnout zone where actually you're feeling quite flat, quite bored. Possibly you might be feeling slightly sad and depressed at that point. And often what you might see is people might start to withdraw slightly in terms of so they won't be the normal person that you usually see every day. You'll notice usually something different about how they are. And then the final box is the red box, which is where you've got low energy but positive feeling. So this is the recovery zone. So this is where you're feeling calm, centered, you're feeling relaxed, and but you're feeling good about this. And what this model highlights is that we will move across a number of those boxes over days and weeks, and actually we can't sustain being in peak performance in that blue box all the time. It's just not possible. And actually, in order for us to be able to move in peak performance, we've got to actively recover. So you do need to move into that recovery zone. So starting to have conversations with members of your team around how are they actively recovering? How are they taking time for themselves? How are they making sure they're looking after themselves when they're not at work, so they are psychologically detaching from what's going on, and how they can do that. So some of the sorts of questions that you might explore with them are covered here. So you might show them that quadrant and ask them to think about where they're spending their time at the moment, most of their time at the moment, and what it feels like when they're in those different boxes, and what contributes to them moving from performance into overextended. And then starting to have a conversation about what does recovery look like for them, and how are they supporting themselves to actively recover. I'm going to pause.
I was just thinking that I think that's really interesting, because we often talk about us wanting to move towards high performing teams, and there's an indication there in the way that we talk about it that we want to be in that top right hand quadrant the whole time. So I think this is a really important conversation. Looking at the bottom of that box in the recovery, obviously you've got the sleepy at the bottom end, and none of us really want to feel that we've got a team who are being sleepy, but I can see dipping up and down in that line would be very different, because you do want your team to be relaxed and content, and then at other times you need them to be aroused and excited and sort of having a different level of energy. So that conversation about what recovery looks like, I can see that would be really helpful with staff, so they're not feeling that they have to be this positive, constant high energy end of work the whole time, particularly in the place that we are now, where to be seen to not be doing like that, there could be a level of guilt around it.
Definitely. And I think it's really important to notice that we can very quickly habituate to low levels of stress, so we don't even notice them, that we're actually we've moved from that high performance, but we're moving into overextended, because it becomes our new sense of normal, because we're used to running at that speed. And it's only when we are able to move into recovery, or we have time off and we suddenly breathe and our shoulders relax and we realize that we've been carrying that around with us. So helping people to have that conversation and to recognize how are they moving across those boxes can really help with them to consciously think about how am I recovering? How am I taking time outside of work, or even moments of recovery within work where actually I do have lunch, I do eat, or I do just have 5 minutes of just having a period of mindfulness where I might, for 5 minutes just center myself, can be really, really important.
Yeah, and I guess from our point of view, role modeling some of that and sharing some of that is going to be no bad thing as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the next tool, I think many of you will probably be familiar with this, or a version of this, but again, it's to support people, to help them recognize. It relates to our sense of locus of control. So that's about when we might be consciously worrying about things, or ruminating about things that we're concerned about, where at the moment we may or may not have control over the outcome of those. So this tool focuses, supports people, and how I would use this with someone that I was working with is sometimes it's quite useful to get someone just on a piece of paper to list down all the things that are kind of keeping them awake at night, or things that are kind of niggles, things that they might be concerned or anxious about, or things that they want answers to questions on, and to list all of those things down. And then invite that person to look at that list they've listed and to almost codify each item against, is that something at this point in time you can control? Have you got complete and utter control over that item, that challenge, that concern that you've listed? Is that something that you could influence? Or at the moment, is that something that is completely out of your control? That at this point in time, you have got no control over that particular worry, challenge, or issue. And supporting someone to go through each of those things and to think about, actually on that list, how many of those things that are currently occupying lots of headspace and emotional energy are things that at this point in time we've got no control over. We can't do anything about that at the moment. And that, through that exercise and working through doing that with someone, that you're almost giving them permission to mentally let go of all the things they're holding on to, that at the moment, all the worrying in the world's not going to change. They can't control the outcome of that situation. And getting to think about, actually, their energy should be to help them think about their energy, focusing on the things that they can control. They have got the power to influence or change or make happen. Okay. Kerry, any thoughts on the use of that tool?
Yeah, I love this tool. I do love this tool. And I think you're right, just listing it down. It sounds a bit counterintuitive because then you've got a whole load of things that are outside of your control, but actually knowing that the process of going through that and listing them down really helps you to then let go of it as well. So yeah, it's a good tool.
I don't think I've ever run this exercise with someone and there's not been at least 2 or 3 things that people list down that fall into that out of control category. And I think there's something quite cathartic around physically writing things down and then working through it. It stops it being all in our head and feeling, running around, and actually putting it down helps it to feel more concrete and more clear, so that we are able to kind of almost take it off our shoulders and let go, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, Kerry, I'm going to hand back to you now to kind of close and talk about next steps and where we're at with all of this.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Really helpful to go through this and have a framework for knowing how to start that conversation and how supportive it can be, and just be able to go through some of those issues. So I know that you said that there'll be a resource pack with some powerful questions that might help, that will help actually as you go through them, choosing the right ones by doing your deep listening. So that will be great. I mentioned before that we do have other coaching videos on this channel. So if you're a coach yourself or you're just interested in knowing a bit more, feel free to have a look at them. I hope you found this a useful piece. Please do get in contact. You've got our contact details on screen there, but there's also in the box below, you'll be able to see our contact details and drop us a line and share your thoughts with us. Thank you for listening with us today, and I look forward to hearing more about what you've been doing in your coaching conversations. Thanks again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.